So today we're going to be speaking. Good morning, Maria. How are you?
I'm well. How are you girls?
Well, you're good. You're good. All good here. So today we're going to be speaking about
Sorry about that.
assessments related to real estate, taxes, and certiorari's or grievances, and what that all means and how it impacts when you make a purchase to a house or a condominium or even a co-op for that matter. So when I work with a client, and Leslie will obviously chime in and say with you, I give them a listing sheet, and people also, they often ask me what the taxes are. I always tell them, and then they ask me what the number is related, just underneath the taxes on the listing sheet, and that's typically the assessment. And I explained to them they were always worried because the assessment often is very high, and they want to know, um, do they have to pay those in taxes? And I tell them no, it's basically the taxes, but the taxes are based on the assessment or the assessed value, or even the market value in some cases. So the assessment is composed of the land value and the improvement, i.e. the house or the structure on top of it, right? So people are very concerned about the assessment and what that really means and how it affects your taxes. So in many communities, and I'll just mention a few in Westchester, such as New Rochelle, White Plains, and Harrison, they are not what we call fully assessed or nearly fully assessed communities. The fully assessed communities would be all the river towns, Larchmont, Mamaroneck, Scarsdale, and some other towns as well. Greenberg, yes. For sure, all the river towns and Greenberg. So that's from Hastings through Sleepy Hollow. And you have to be concerned when you see it's a fully assessed tax, because what you have to be concerned about when you look at the assessment, especially because the prices have jumped up so high, that let's say, I'll give you an example. In Scarsdale, for instance, which is not 100%, but it's almost, maybe it's 95 or 96% assessed. If you see an assessment of, let's say, $1 million, but if you see an asking price of $1.4 million, you know those taxes are going to go up. So as a realtor and as an attorney, and you want to be able to guide your client, and they have to understand that the taxes they're going to be paying, at least maybe not the first few months, but clearly by the next year, will be based on purchase price. And that's something that's very important when it comes specifically to a single family home.
Yeah. I think it's really important, and I think a lot of times it's just not something that like not every real estate agent is upfront about that, or maybe they just don't think to talk about it, and the buyer, the clients don't think to ask those questions, right? Because they see the taxes that are on the Zillow listing, and that's what they think their taxes are going to be. Right. And, 9 times out of 10, the taxes, when we get to the closing, especially if they're getting financing on the loan, those numbers do not match exactly. Right. So I think it's a really important, like what you're distinguishing there, that like, hey, these taxes are that the seller is paying is based off of what they bought the home for, right? And that if it's trading at a much higher price, that most likely the taxes are going to go up in those areas where where it's fully assessed, right?
Right, absolutely. And even you have to keep in mind, even in areas that are not fully assessed, right? Let's speak about New Rochelle. You still have to check the taxes, because often those taxes do not reflect a huge addition that was recently added to the home.
Right, that's true, right? Because it doesn't always, it takes like a few periods to get it, to get a record of it for months now.
So like Leslie, as an attorney, right? If somebody's coming to you, like the buyer's coming to you to hire you, is that something that that's part of your due diligence that you're looking at? Like, would you say, oh, we should, like, let's think about like the taxes might actually go up because an addition had been added 2 years ago or something like that?
I mean, I certainly talk about it to the clients so they understand. However, some of it is an unknown to me because I don't, I'll have what the broker is giving, the agent's giving me based on Zillow. but I don't get those final numbers until I receive the
Title
title report, which is 2
report.
to 3
Right,
weeks later
exactly.
when we're in contract
Right.
already.
Right.
So, and some people like don't properly note on the listing. So
Right.
sometimes
Check.
you have to check because if you on Zillow, sometimes they're not correct, or there were times when people are getting some sort of an exemption, a senior exemption, a
Right.
star exemption, where
They don't trade with the land.
they don't
Right.
run with the land. So if you're getting a star exemption, that next new buyer, if they don't qualify, they're not getting that star exemption.
I find like on the financing side that the biggest like sort of misconception or issue that we can sometimes run into is, the client has thought a lot about how much money they need for their down payment, right? They know exactly what like 20% is or 10%, whatever it is they're putting down. And most of them will have a pretty good sense of what their closing costs are. Like they know if there's going to be mansion tax, mortgage tax, et cetera. But what a lot of people don't plan for is, what I call, they're not closing costs and it's not down payment, but it's still cash that you might need at closing. And that is if any taxes are due at closing or due within 60 days of when you close, you're going to be paying those out of pocket, right then and there. If you're getting a mortgage with a lender, typically they're going to want to escrow your taxes and insurance. And so you're going to need to put a couple of months, 2 to 4 months into an escrow account. And, when I'm pre-approving clients, I always say, look, you've got enough money here, to buy the home and you've got enough money for the closing costs, but like there are going to be other expenses. You're going to need cash for other things. You're going to need to buy an insurance policy. And then of course this tax thing is, it's an unknown until, like you said, until you get the title search that you then share.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing, Maria, is that, when a tax is coming due within 60 days and that tax period is not out yet,
Yeah.
and the title company is required to pick it up, they take 20% over most title
Right.
companies, over what the last tax period is. So that's even, you get that money back, but it's money that you have to put out.
You still have to, you still have to have the money to lay out. Exactly.
Right. I think what I want to mention in relation to when we were speaking before about taxes, that they could go up, especially, I'm very cognizant of this, especially in fully assessed communities. For instance, let's say in Greenberg or any of those towns, when it comes to a condominium, and this is something I just really researched recently, as opposed to a house, even though the purchase price may be 400,000 above the last assessment, it will not necessarily, it doesn't go up the way a house would. They don't see it in the same way, meaning the municipality will not reassess based on purchase price the way they will do on a house.
Gotcha.
But they'll reassess, they told me, on the cost approach. So they do it very differently, and therefore it's not that onerous and it's not that damaging to a buyer, because they could be, let's say, 200 units in that complex. So they probably they do look at it very differently. So that's kind of if you're buying a townhouse or an HOA or a condominium, that's something definitely to consider when in a fully assessed community. And the other thing that we really wanted to speak about today were certiorari's or tax grievances, because that's clearly a way for people to reduce their taxes once they purchase it, right? So in the different communities, they do it at different times. So in most communities in Westchester, it's the first 2 weeks of June. But sometimes the assessor will allow you to meet with them when you have a contract or when you close on a house, even if it's before June.
Right. So, but in most cases, it's, I think that they said that the Tuesday, the first Tuesday in June. A few towns are in February, like Larchmont and Bronxville will be, and a few others are in February, but for the vast majority
They're
is
in
the
June.
June.
Right. And
So
in
Leslie,
Whitefield, it's January.
If somebody, let's say I just buy the home, and let's say I'm the new owner, I'm not the owner of the home until the end of June. Do I then have to wait until the following year to that open period comes around? Right.
Yes,
because you can't, like, I've had clients that have wanted to do it before they're like, well, we're purchasing the home, we want to start the grievance process now. And I'm like, No, I don't think you can do that. You have to be the owner of record at the time that, right?
Right, but often what'll happen is you can, the seller will enter into an agreement with one of these tax grievance companies or attorneys,
Right.
and they can assign their rights to
Right.
to the buyer, so that gets attached to the contract. Now, any savings there is, it depends how the contract is
Right.
negotiated,
Right.
who gets the
The
benefit
seller
of
might
that.
want some of that.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, right, or they could pay each other back, but at least they
Right.
could reimburse them, but at least the process, they don't have to wait a whole nother year. And I think
Right.
when you're taking a listing, this is something you should discuss, or one should discuss with their client, the seller, to, to alert them that their taxes are way over assessed.
Yeah.
And you really know by checking the market value, like I have a house, actually it's a mixed use property, where it's valued, the market value is something like $1.4 million, but the asking price is in the eights.
Right.
And so you know that those taxes can come down. And I was even told by the municipality that I do not, or that the client does not have to wait until the grievance period. If you close before June 1st, show us the contract, show us the closing statement or the CD,
Right.
and we'll just reduce the taxes based on purchase price alone.
Gotcha.
So I think that that's very good to know.
Yeah.
And I think the other, in terms of taxes, and another way of saving some money would be if you qualify for the New York State Star exemption, right? The basic star. And each town is a little bit different in what they offer. It's offered the school portion, but I know in New Rochelle it's about 1,500 and change. I think Scarsdale is 1,200 and change. Armonk, I'm not, you have to qualify for it, but each town is, and it comes out usually in September, and there are other exemptions as well. You mentioned a
Well, you
veteran.
use veterans exemption, a senior
Yeah.
star, as
I
well.
think the main, probably the main point that we want to get across to anybody that's listening is just that these things exist, right? And to do the research, talk to your attorney, and see if explore to see what other options might be available to you.
Right.
Right. Well, I
Yeah.
think,
And also time, if you can, time your closing, but, so that you can file in June if you know it's coming up.
Right.
That's consideration. Or, and what I find sometimes in these contracts is the seller may have applied and doesn't notify anyone, and then we find out at the last second that this contract exists,
Right.
which is fine, but it should have been disclosed at the time of the contract signing, not like we shouldn't find out about it 4 weeks later when
Right.
suddenly it's about to close.
Right.
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 So
Right.
it's good to keep it. So the buyer and the seller should definitely keep us, they should
Yeah.
alert us to their
In the loop.
intentions
Right.
and their
Right.
concerns, right?
And it really should be listed on a memo.
Right.
Yeah.
That this kind of agreement exists, it should be maybe something that you as a realtor ask, the buyers and sellers, does this exist?
Right,
Right.
like, are you grieving your taxes? So that's something that we should really know. So I think
Awesome.
that these are really all good points.
All really great
to
stuff. Yeah.
discuss, and I think it's a really, especially going towards tax time, right? Not only when we pay our taxes, but in terms of our real estate taxes,
Right.
it's something that we should really be alert to and really be aware of. And if anybody has any questions, feel free to reach out to all of us. And
Yeah.
we wish you a happy Easter and a very nice
Happy Easter
Weekend.
weekend, everyone.
Right.
And you guys look so you look so springy in your office. I'm repping my daughter's school. We have a big game tonight. We're in the Sweet
Oh, nice.
16,
Good
so
Good
go
luck.
go pack.
Bye-bye. Have a great
All right,
weekend.
bye-bye.
Good luck.
Have a great weekend. Bye.
Bye-bye.